our reading, our contemporary reading this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on where you are in the world right now. I believe we've got folks from, well, I'll let them all introduce themselves, but I will tell you we've got people from pretty much all over the planet at this point, I think. I don't think we're missing too many spots. This is a contemporary reading, and we've got some great reads for you. So yeah, we're gonna let folks introduce themselves. Again, I am MD New. I will not be reading. I will be wrangling in this motley crew. So Kevin, since you laughed, you get to start with your introduction.
Look, my name is Kevin Clare. I'm published through Nine Star Press. A lot of people think I write romance. I have written some romance. Oh, you can't even see the books that good, so I won't hold them up. But I kind of dabble in sort of magic realism and or urban fantasy, whatever you want to call it. I don't like genres, and I have written one dystopian as well, based on a future society totally addicted to social media, which kind of sounds like now, really. So that's me. That's pretty much me.
Wonderful. Hans, how about yourself?
Yep, my name is Hans Hirschi, Hirschi, for those of you who prefer that. I'm hailing from in the middle of the night, Sweden. I write mostly contemporary, with a twist of sci-fi sometimes, a twist of fantasy other times, a little bit of some kids' books. I dabble in everything. I try to expand my horizon that way. So that's what I do.
Wonderful. And his books will make you cry. Just be prepared. Just so you know.
Yeah.
I need some tissues.
Yeah. Petrina, how about you?
Yes, hello. I'm Petrina Binney. I am from England. Pushing 40, pretty hard at the moment. Thank you. Yeah. I write contemporary women's fiction, which is just fiction generally. That's me.
Excellent. And Rick, how about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Rick R. Reed, and I write all of my stuff is set in contemporary worlds, pretty much. That it's hard to slap labels on things I write. I suppose when you slap labels on them, I write horror, I write romance, I write crime-based fiction, I write psychological suspense. I write whatever catches my fancy. And I think a theme that runs through my work is just the redemptive power of love. And that's true even for the most horrific stuff I write. So, and I've been doing it for a long time. I've got a lot of books to my credit, and it's something I love to do, which is a fortunate thing because I don't know that I can do anything else. So that's me.
Excellent. That is wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. We've already got some comments in our streaming chat from YouTube. One of them specifically geared towards Tree. It's from Glenn. He said, "Tell Tree I'm here. I thought we might get on camera together."
Oh, bless him. It would be lovely to see him. Hello, Glenn.
And a couple of other folks have said hi, and they're excited to hear what we have got on store. So let's see. Magic mirror on the wall. Let's start with Hans. You're going to be our first reader.
Okay, good. Well, I brought you a little something from my latest release. There's the camera. It's a book called Matt, More Than Words. It's about a young man who is suffering from severe cerebral palsy. So he's unable to move and he's unable to communicate. And we're dipping our toes into chapter 5. So it's a little bit into the book. It's a key scene, and we're seeing it from Matt's point of view. We've already experienced the same scene from his assistant Timmy's point of view. So there's not everything is in the scene because we've already read that from the other point of view. But anyway, here we go. When Timmy sat down, his left leg ended up right next to the wheel. No, sorry. See, that's what happens when you do this electronically. You're on the wrong page. Anyway, Matt had enjoyed the massage thoroughly. He was in heaven. To be touched the way Timmy touched him was truly blissful, not to mention that it greatly relaxed him. And he felt how his motor control increased ever so slightly after each massage, if only for a short while. His muscle spasms were calmed, and he could wiggle the toes of his right foot. It had always been a sport for Matt to wiggle his toes. It only worked on his right foot, but to have just one body part that would do his bidding at least sometimes was important to him. Nobody had ever noticed it, but he had become quite good at it, especially the big toe on his right foot. Not even Timmy had noticed it. Leaning with his upper body against Timmy's broad chest, relaxing to the touch of his strong arms, the manly scent of him wafting into his nostrils, making him feel safe from all the world's evils, Matt was letting his soul dangle. The weirdest feelings rushed through his body. He wanted for the massage to never end, but inevitably it would. The best part was when Timmy would climb up behind him in his bed and work on his shoulders and chest. Then he would climb down again and continue working on his arms. The touch of Timmy's hands and fingers against his felt so intimate. Matt was utterly incapable of even the lightest of voluntary squeezes, yet it was the one thing he dreamed of, to hold Timmy's hands. To squeeze it when he was holding it, massaging his palms and fingers. He'd seen other people hold hands. He remembered his grandparents holding hands at times when they were out and about, and complete strangers he'd see on the boardwalk, or as they sat on benches or passed him by, very much in love. To Matt, holding hands was the ultimate sign of affection. Matt's love was a broad church, so to speak. He did not differentiate between the love of a lover or parental love. He loved people who were kind to him, who treated him as a person rather than a patient or, worse, an inconvenience. And he loved Timmy. He felt warm and fuzzy whenever Timmy was around, and he acutely felt the devastation when Timmy's shift ended, or even just when he left the room. But he tried not to think about that. Best of all were the emotions that surged through him whenever Timmy would touch him, which he regularly did. Much more so than the other assistants, more so than even his mother. Although he felt a tingling sensation when she kissed him on the forehead or hugged him. But Timmy's hugs were better, different somehow, though he wasn't sure why, but he was aware of the physical manifestations of it. At the breakfast table, Matt was bored. While he felt calm and more relaxed than he had in a long time, he wished Timmy would hurry up with the food so they could go out. While he was watching Timmy prepare his food, pouring cereal into the yogurt and stirring it, he kept wiggling his toes, and he had good control of his big toe. Watching Timmy stir the yogurt, soak and soften the cereal, add a healthy dose of that disgusting nutrient power, he kept moving his toes. Then Timmy sat down. His left leg ended up right next to the wheelchair's right footrest. Although Matt was unable to see Timmy's legs, his naked feet could sense their proximity, the faintest flow of air over his foot as Timmy's leg moved. And with a Herculean effort, Matt tried to move his foot. He didn't know how far away Timmy's legs were and hoped it was more than an inch or so. That was when he felt it, resistance, and the slightest of movement. Warm, hairy, he'd found it. Wondering if Timmy was paying attention to him while focusing on feeding him, Matt enjoyed the warm physical touch against his naked soul. Then he moved his toe, pressing it into Timmy's shin. He had no idea if Timmy would even realize what he was doing, focusing instead on trying to look at Timmy. What happened next shocked Matt, but the joy and disbelief on Timmy's face was totally worth it. When Timmy urged him to try again, he happily obliged and pressed again. And when Timmy challenged him to a double press, he tricked him. It took him a while to really focus on his toe, but then he managed the 3 presses in short succession, surprising even himself, and he laughed. The look on Timmy's face when he realized Matt had played a little trick on him had been priceless. Then he indulged him and pressed twice, just to make sure Timmy knew he had understood every word. Never before had he been more motivated to try and break out of his involuntary shell, to tear down that wall of silence behind which he'd been trapped his whole life.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Very, very nice. Thank you so much, Hans. Tree, let's go to you next.
Yep, sure. Waking the thing up. Didn't have the good sense to actually get a physical copy, so this is, yeah. It will hopefully, behave itself. I'm going to read you a little bit from a short story I wrote last year called Desperately Speaking. It would help if I remembered the title. Desperately Seeking Spinach. As one does. Okay. It wasn't as if I hadn't heard of her before. Andrea Pinchbeck is a national treasure. She's been on TV if I told her she'd been on TV for as long as I've been alive, I imagine she'd make a noise at the back of her throat, a low grumble like a sob without the ambition. On the other hand, if I told her that she'd been on TV since the beginning of time, she'd laugh it off and wave her hand to bat away the comment. Women are complicated. The fact is, she's always been there. Through every triumph and frustration, every hope and devastation, it's always been her. Every afternoon, the bus would pull in just opposite the end of my road, and I'd pick my way past little old ladies in rain bonnets, moaning about their varicose veins and husbands and glaring at me, watching that I didn't kick their shopping on the way to the doors. I'd slide my way past the creepy guy who always stood even when there were seats available, not looking him in the eye because you wouldn't. It would be rude. Man can't help his face. Quick nod to the bus driver and I'd fly through the doors, patent leather pumps and satchel swinging back and forth behind me. Sometimes it would take a minute or two to find a gap in the traffic before I could cross. I hated days like those. I'd bob up and down like an overexcited toddler looking at an ice cream. Now I'm older and can see it for what it was. Whenever you're in a hurry, there's always traffic. It's just the universe and tourists looking for Tudor buildings or trying to find the fort, conspiring to keep you in your thick eyeliner and ankle socks and make you miss your favorite shows. Being late for the dentist was irrelevant. He'd be there whether or not I turned up at all. Being late for afternoons with Andrea was practically the end of the world. I can laugh about it now. I don't laugh about it now. She'd never know I'd missed it, and that thought made me feel so small I could feel my shoulders drooping and my insides melting into a soup of guts and spleen. I feel no shame in the memory of this. Sometimes people think back to their first loves and they're cut to pieces by embarrassment, disappointment, scandal, horror, and longing. I feel fateful, light, not happy, not unhappy, like a dandelion puff on a warm breeze, but that's probably because I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'd get off the school bus, growl at the traffic, curse the tourists, and we're back to where we were. I'd dash through the front door, hurl my school bag to the floor, call a hello to my mother, this was back when she was still upstairs, and rush through to the front room. My dad would already have left for work, but there'd be a tray on the coffee table, sandwich, bottle of Sunny D, and a note. There was a theme to his notes. They were always different, but they all said the same kind of thing. That I was wonderful, that he was proud of me, and that Mum would need her pills at 6 p.m. 3 things that never changed. I don't suppose he knows, but there's an old shoebox on top of my wardrobe where I still have all his notes. I could never part with them. Sorry, did it again. So I'd throw myself onto the sofa, pull at my school tie, slip it up over my nose and across my forehead like a headband, and flip on the TV. Grabbing the sandwich and kicking off my shoes, I'd lean back into the cushions, and there she was, Andrea Pinchbeck. Her eyes are warm brown, impish, inquisitive. Sometimes you can tell from the eyes of a person whether or not they have a sense of humor. Andrea Pinchbeck has a sense of everything. It's all there in her eyes. Recently, she started to let her hair go natural, champagne blonde with just a hint of salt and pepper. Her skin is fresh, her makeup subtle. Her dress sense is what I would call comfortably chic. She looks like she's ready for a visit from her in-laws. Classy, without being standoffish. Gorgeous figure, especially for someone who presumably spent the 1990s eating roast dinners and a huge amount of cake. That is, if she actually ate the food from her shows, which she must have done. She's from Leeds. They don't waste things up north. She's beautiful. Well, I don't need to tell you, you've seen her, but she really is. There's a lilt in her voice, an echo of her hometown. I love that. Sometimes people take the mickey online. They say she started to sound like a soft Southern Nancy. But they're not listening hard enough. The North is still in there. It's just gentle, I suppose. They've been spoilt by too many regional dramas, with pickled thumb farmers, head to foot in manure, tugging a forelock at the lady of the manor who was also never quite northern enough, but had a deeply dissatisfying love life to balance out her rounded vowels. There you go. Is that 5 minutes? Thank you so much.
That was perfect.
Thank you. Gosh, my heart was banging like a drum.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
Oh,
Really.
you're kind. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
very nice.
Well,
Rick,
that's
Well done.
how about you? You ready to
Me?
go?
Yes, I'm going to read something. I'm going to read the opening scene, which I've cut down a lot to make the time, you know, not go over 5 minutes. So if the action jumps all of a sudden, it's because it has. I'm actually reading from my new release called The Midnight Man that's coming out on August the 16th in a few months. And I don't need to preface it because it is an opening scene, so you'll get the idea. Stanley gazed into the fridge as he waited for his partner, Francesco, and their conquest for the night to stop smooching at the front door and come inside. He checked for eggs and milk. He was thankful there were chives in a container, so breakfast for their guests could be a tad more exotic. But he'd have to go easy on the toast as there were only 3 slices of sourdough left, and he didn't want to open the boring old multigrain. He closed his eyes to recall the night. Their plaything was licking his lips with just the right amount of tongue when he propositioned Francesco at the nightclub. He hadn't even noticed Stanley. But if the couple didn't respond to the young man's request, he'd move on to the next potentials, and Stanley and Francesco would have to choose between those altered by alcohol or happy pills, and Stanley knew those sins outstay their welcome like bad wallpaper. Francesco stumbled into the living room trying to make martinis. Their boy was giggling like a preschooler who'd heard a limerick. But the disco-laden images of earlier that night were still haunting Stanley. "Dinky, the martinis are ready!" Stanley frowned at hearing his nickname. It was his curtain call to re-enter this flawed 3-character play. "Elijah can't believe you're 50 soon," Francesco said, handing Stan his cocktail. "You look so young." The lad gazed wide-eyed for more time than naturally required. "Your hair's thinning a little, but I know guys half your age who are seriously bald. See, Dinky, even Elijah thinks you're handsome for your age." "Thank you," Stanley mumbled. He sat on the edge of the armrest of a large sofa. Elijah sat with his legs stretched out, enjoying the comfort of their recliner as if it was his own. He grinned at Francesco like a patient kid waiting too long for dessert. "I hope you like scrambled eggs," Stanley said. "Say what?" Elijah snickered. "You said you were staying for breakfast," Stan replied. "You said so on the way home." "Oh, no." Elijah looked horrified as if dessert were cancelled. "You're taking me out for breakfast." "Oh, he wants to be paraded," said Francesco. "Yeah, like a gold medal." Stanley tried his best not to roll his eyes. "So what made you choose us tonight?" "You're an established couple," Elijah replied. "You know your shit. You've dealt with your shit. Older men are so much more fun." He turned to Stanley. "Most times I go out, I pick up an older couple." Stanley couldn't help thinking how rehearsed Elijah sounded. "Has that strategy always worked?" "Of course." "Really?" "Yeah, except when one guy is more uptight than the other." "I think we should get down to business," Francesco laughed. "We're all here for the same thing." "Of course." Elijah didn't break eye contact with Stanley. "Absolutely," Stanley replied. "Can I talk to you for a moment, Dinky?" Francesco strolled past Stanley, who reluctantly followed him into their bedroom. "Think of it as an early birthday gift, a way to recapture your youth." "Frankie, I don't trust him. We're having sex with him. We're not signing a business contract with him. He has attitude. He's on drugs. And you know drugs today. They're not the chill pills like in our day. Please, Dinky, do this for me." Stanley didn't respond. Francesco reached for the top drawer next to his bed. Inside a small ornamental tin was his dope stash. Next to it were his papers. He rolled a joint. Elijah sauntered in, naked. Oh, I knew I'd do that. This is my icebreaker, the lad said. When hookups leave me alone for too long, Elijah sunk into their antique armchair and spread out so the couple could scrutinize his masculinity. It was already at half-mast. Francesco offered a puff, but Elijah waved it away. Stanley took it and anxiously drew on it like a prisoner facing a firing squad. "Why don't you take your clothes off?" Elijah asked. Francesco loosened his belt and unzipped his jeans. He could smell youth in front of him, and in that mystical deodorized scent, he felt the stirrings of his own younger self. He took a swig of his martini and placed it on the teak drawers. This was foremost his preferred drug of denial. Elijah played with his own nipple. "You want me and you're not in control," he thought. Francesco willingly reached for the lad's other nipple. Stanley watched, gradually moving behind the chair. "Why am I here?" The joint was still smouldering, so he took another hit. Many unresolved feelings accompanied the smoke into his lungs. Shame, despair, loneliness. The last was hardest to digest. It sailed deeper than his breath. He closed his eyes. A hand reached for Stanley, unzipping him, and in his daze he moved forward. A mouth was tasting him below. But Stan stayed distant in his mind. His troubled emotions had to be kept at bay. He numbed himself of all the things he'd left unsaid, as he let the lad pleasure him. Tears of sorrow were passed off as tears of delight. Stan pictured a bathtub, bubbles floating, bursting on the tiles. Francesco was with him, younger, kissing Stanley amid the foam. A playful ruffle of hair, a finger tracing its way down to Stan's toes, a gentle caress of Stan's rosy tip. His stomach churned. This was the first signal of the end of this ordeal. Soon he'd be streaming what was expected of him, an action pure and direct. White lines christened Elijah. His chest claimed evidence of another man's satisfaction. Francesco peered at his partner. One hand still clutched their guest, while the other hand brought the last drop of his martini to his lips. With a poker face, he declared, "Happy premature birthday, Stan."
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, then.
Well, it's a sex scene, but it's not a sex scene. It's not about erotica or naughtiness.
No, definitely not. Okay, Rick, you are up.
Okay. I'm going to read a little bit from my novel. I can never get this right on camera. The Q, which has nothing to do with QAnon. It's a novel that takes place on one pivotal night in a small town gay bar in Appalachia. And it delves into the lives of the different regulars that congregate there. So this is one of those regulars. Nelson DiCarlo wondered for the 1000th Saturday night why he didn't stay home. After all, he had regular cable, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and YouTube. He had a fully stocked liquor cabinet and could make himself just about any cocktail he could imagine, from the simple gin and tonic with a twist of lime to the exotic, a Pim's cup with orange and cucumber slices. His pantry was stocked with chips, cookies, and crackers to go with the cheeses and dips in his fridge. His dog, Homer, a so ugly he's cute mix of dachshund and poodle, was always ready to cuddle or take a long walk in the night air. So he couldn't say he was lacking for company. Homer was short on judgment, long on love, and as long as Nels was paying attention, the dog never got bored. If Nels's attention did stray, the dog reeled him back in by covering his face with kisses. No, really, there was no reason why he, at 62 years old, should be getting ready to go out to a bar on a Saturday night. Really, he needed to simply accept his lot and stay in, go to bed early like the old man he was. Nearly entirely banished were the dreams that being out at the Q, the only gay bar in his little one-horse town of Hopewell, West Virginia, would conjure up a man who'd be everything Nels dreamed of: a passionate lover, a faithful companion, a best friend forever. He even held out little reason to believe the conversations he'd have with the same folks he saw every Saturday night at the Q would be any different or more exciting than they had been on any other Saturday night dating back years. He had no reason to think that even if he'd given up all hope for a Mr. Right to come along on his white horse, he would meet a Mr. Right now. There were a few of those in his past, but none lately, not for a long time. So long, in fact, that Nels no longer pined for a physical connection with another man. So why go out? It was routine. It was a bore. He was old and so tired. Yet here he found himself in the tiny blue and yellow ceramic tile bathroom of the house he'd grown up in, the one he'd inherited from his mom when she passed from lung cancer 7 years ago, shaving in front of the medicine cabinet mirror. It was funny how he sometimes glimpsed the man he once was in that mirror, especially when half of his wizened face was hidden by Barbasol shaving cream. If he squinted just right, he could look back in time and see the man he'd once been, hidden in the depths of the glass. He'd been handsome, what Mom would call a head turner. On the shorter side, at 5'8", Nels had been solidly packed with effortless muscle and good definition, firm pecs, bulging biceps, thick black wavy hair, and eyes so dark the pupils got lost in the irises. A perpetual 5 o'clock shadow that highlighted, rather than hid, the sharp angles and planes of his face, a contrast to his Cupid's bow lips. People, men mostly, used to tell him he should be a model. That young buck hidden in the mirror was forever mistaken for being younger than he actually was. In his 20s, he was always asked for an ID. When he was in his 30s, everyone imagined he was in his 20s. In his 40s, people guessed 30s. Even in his 50s, people would guess mid to late 40s, and they were always surprised when Nels corrected them because he never lied about his age. It was always a delight to get the compliments. I never would have guessed. What's your secret? And that dreaded left-handed compliment. You look great for your age. And then suddenly, and without warning, he looked his age. The revelation crept up quietly and fast. Nels would guess it happened around the time he hit his late 50s, when the hair at the top of his head had thinned so much that more scalp than hair showed, when the hair above his ears and at the back of his head, now shorn short, turned mostly salt, when tufts began sprouting stubbornly from his ears and growing on his back, when his waistline went from a reliable 32 to 33 and then 34. Nels wouldn't buy a pair of Levi's bigger than that, no matter how tight they were. And he didn't even want to consider the bags under his eyes or the lines across his forehead and around his mouth. They called those latter ones laugh lines, but Nels DiCarlo wasn't laughing. No, he wasn't in the least amused. That young guy, he was told more than once at the Q, back in the days when it was a secret place and one had to be buzzed in the door, that he could have his pick of any men in the bar any time. And he did. Pick and pick and pick. A kid in a candy store. Rarely did anyone refuse Nels's attention. They came home with him or he with them. Sometimes they lasted more than a night or a couple dates. Some, like Roger Baines, lasted years despite his having a wife tucked away across the Ohio River. Roger was forever promising to leave Betsy once she finished her degree and found a job, or once their daughter Joy was grown and out of the house. Nels had wasted his 20s on the loser, years he'd never get back. How many Christmases had Nelson sat alone, hoping Roger would at least call him to wish him a merry one? Would it have been so hard to at least pick up the telephone? Every man Nelson had fallen in love or lust with had turned out to be a disappointment. How could his odds have been so bad? What had he done to make him so unlovable? He'd always been able to rely on his looks, and now those were fading fast. Would someone even look twice at him these days? These were questions he pondered in the middle of the night, when the eaves groaned in response to the lonely wind, and Homer snored lightly, curled up under the covers in the crook of Nelsie's knees. For a long time, he'd relied on his handsomeness to connect him to men, and indeed to the rest of humanity. His attractiveness made him visible. People saw him. Whether those same looks inspired jealousy, intrigue, or passion, they were reliable. He could count on them. He could bank on the hope they provided. And when they began to fade, Nelson started to wonder who he really was. Who was the guy behind the pretty face? Was there any substance there? Or had he been all gloss and veneer, with nothing substantial behind the pretty? He took his looks for granted until they were gone. He'd grieve the loss if he didn't know, deep in his heart, time caught up to everyone. At least in that regard, he wasn't alone. Small comfort. Once his age was writ large across his features, he became the watcher instead of the watched. That's it. Thank you.
Lovely.
Very nice.
Thank you.
That was all some really good stuff, everybody. That was, wow. I mean, very different, very across the spectrum. So that was kind of a nice mix-up. Thank you all for sharing that with us. So one of the questions that I've got that I'd like to throw out to all of you is, especially given what we just heard, do you pull from real life, or is everything you write made up? And let's start with Trina. You're making a face, so I'm going to pick you.
Excellent. I'm often making a face. I mean, some stuff is from real life because I'm living real life. So yeah, I don't think many of my characters come from other people. I think they're mostly me, or shades of me. But yeah, I suppose everything really comes from some experience. Don't know. What about you, fellas?
Well, what would I know about a 62-year-old gay man who, like me, grew up on the Ohio River, who questions his purpose in life as he gets older? I don't know anything about that, so it's totally fictional.
I'm always drawing, if someone says a funny line or something whimsical or words of wisdom, they usually make it into a book. One of my books, Nate's Last Tango, actually features an argument me and my husband Warren have actually had. And my Actors in Angels series, Drama Queens with Love Scenes, and Drama Queens, are loosely based on me and my husband. And in fact, even the last one, Drama Queens and Devilish Schemes, I had to imagine what would put our relationship totally on the brink and then try to find a way to work it back and save it. That one's totally fictional. But yeah, I even use characters. There's an insecure angel called Guy in Drama Queens with Love Scenes who is based on a very insecure guy we used to know. So yeah, I'm always using things from real life. Oh, but a lot of fictional stuff. That thing I read today is totally fictional and not based on anything.
What about you?
I think for me, it's maybe a little bit different. My first novel was very much me, and I feel that once I got that out of my system, I was able to focus more on other stuff. But obviously it is coming from me. It is me somehow. It's my subconscious telling me what to put on paper or on the laptop. And once I'm done with the first draft of the book and I go back and I revisit it, I'm able to see certain traits. So the amalgamation that a character has become. I can see, okay, there's a little bit of this and there's a little bit of that, and maybe this scene is inspired by that specific happening that happened to me, but I don't think I've ever put, you know, a real life scene as it is in a book. I don't work that way. I couldn't, because that would require for me to consciously write, and I can't do that.
Excellent. A question popped up that says, do you think it's important to write for readers or for yourself? That's a great question. Thank you, Tracy.
I've got a.
Please, anybody.
My thought is, I write for readers, but a lot of stuff I write, I'm dealing with stuff. Like even in Drama Queens with Love Scenes, I was being bullied at work at the time, and like one of the characters is based on two of the characters that bullied me at work. And part of what I went through, even though the book is set in the afterlife, in the theatre district of the afterlife, I still took those themes and worked with them. Another one of my books is Winter Masquerade, which looks at a character who is in an abusive relationship, which I was back in the 80s for a short time. And so it helps me work through things, but I'm not writing it for me. I think you have to write from here, but you are writing thinking of the audience and how they're going to respond and what entices them to keep reading.
Yeah.
I think
Rick, go ahead.
for me, I'm probably the opposite. It sounds so selfish to me to say I write for myself, but I have to tell the stories that I need to get out of me. And so I guess I do write for myself, but I hope that people will come along with me on that journey. It's important for me to listen to my inner crazy voices and bring them about in a story. And so if I'm not invested completely in what I'm writing, I guess this is the bottom line. If I'm not invested completely in what I'm writing, I don't think I'm going to bring much satisfaction to a reader. So if I'm not crying at my keyboard at a certain scene, if I'm not laughing at a certain scene, if I'm not like wondering what's going to happen next, because I don't always know what's going to happen next, then I don't think I'm going to produce something that a reader will want to read. And every book, for I think every writer, is always a collaboration between the reader and the writer. So whatever we put out there becomes a mind movie in the reader's head, hopefully, and that connection is made. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I would have to say I'm exactly where Rick is. And I'm always the first person to read what I write, and the reactions are just as Rick described. Sometimes you cry, sometimes you laugh, sometimes you have to walk away from that laptop for a while. I've thought about this question a lot, because whenever you talk to the professionals and you talk to the people, especially publishers, they will tell you, you have to focus on your readers, and you have to find your segment, and you have to know exactly what your audience is. And yeah, but I don't write I can't write. I couldn't write, if I had to write for an audience, if somebody were to tell me, you have to remember, the 40 plus females in the upper middle income bracket, that's your target audience, I would walk away. And say, okay, let someone else do it. It's just not me.
Yeah. Tree, what about you?
I write in the desperate hope I'm not the only reader. That's me. But on the off chance I am, I write something that will make me laugh. Thank you.
Can I ask something of everyone here? If that's the case, do you find it easy to reread your own stuff, or do you find it hard to read your stuff and you don't read it again?
I can read any of my books anytime. If I don't find anything else to read, I'll go back and read one of my old ones. Sorry, I love my own stuff. I just sorry. I
find it hard to read my own work.
I reread so much when I'm writing it that it is hard for me to go back because that's my process. I reread and reread and reread, and I edit as I go along. So it is hard for me sometimes to go back and reread my own stuff. And when I've had audiobooks done, I can't stand to listen to that. It's really a chore for me. And I don't know why. And the only things I can reread are things that amuse me. And usually if they really make me laugh, I can read them dozens of times and they'll continue to make me laugh.
It's fun reading them, but sometimes it's cringeworthy when you find typos from years back, and
Yeah.
stuff that was missed in the editing process. It goes like, oh God,
And that's another thing. It's like there's always, oh, I could have done this better.
Yeah.
Why didn't I say it this way? So that's maybe another reason I keep away from it and keep moving forward.
And Tree, what about you?
The snippet that I just read with my heart banging, I haven't read that since I published it. But like Rick, when I'm writing, I'm constantly rewriting and fixing it and going back and rereading and fixing it. And so it feels like I've basically memorized it. And then we get to this, which is basically a year later, and I'd forgotten the name of my main character, didn't really remember that much of the story. Yeah, I mean, I should probably read myself a bit more often, just to see the evolution of, I'm sure my first book is definitely a first book, which is fine because it deserves to be. But the difficulty with it is, of course, when do you stop? Because probably I could write better than that now. I like to think I could write better than that now, but then I'll write it better again when I'm 55, when I'm 60. When do I stop? So just keep moving like a shark. In no way like a shark, but that's all right.
Let's see, I've got another question here. We kind of talked a little bit about this, but it'd be good to see what you guys think. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to go with a different question because I'm the moderator and I can do that. Are there topics that you try to avoid? Is there anything that you won't write? Is there any, I think that's pretty self-explanatory at that point, but is there anything that you really steer clear of, like, no, absolutely not. That's not my wheelhouse. That's not what I'm going to do.
I won't write about topics I don't know about because I'm too lazy to research.
Excellent answer. I like that.
You can't copy it, Trina.
Oh, damn.
Anybody else?
I wish I had Kevin's answer. I really wish. My current work in progress plays out in the 1980s in France. Just when AIDS was really starting to spread, and that's what the story's about. The character has already died in another one of my books from HIV, and the research is grueling, and it's just. But I can't get this guy out of my head, so I don't have a choice. But in terms of topics I stay away from, it's probably just there's a lot of stuff in romance that I would never touch. All of the romance tropes that I just have to stay clear of, mpreg and just to pick one of the worst ones. But apart from that, I'm pretty much known to write what other people leave out in their garbage. I usually take it home and pet it and take care of it.
Rick, what about you?
Well, I hate that phrase, write what you know, because, and I hate it and believe in it, but I think there's a lot of confusion around it, at least the way I think of it. I think of writing what you know as kind of telling your emotional truth and being close to who you are as a person, who you are in your heart. So you can write about paranormal, you can write about places you've never been, perhaps. But I guess I try to stick fairly close to what I know to be true in my heart and what resonates for me emotionally. So I wouldn't stray too far from that. So that's probably the reason I would never write like swords and sorcerers fantasy or some kind of really hardcore science fiction. Or I tend to stick with contemporary times, with people who are not are with. I try to stick with ordinary people who are confronted with extraordinary situations, and so I think that's kind of my thing.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, we all have our boundaries. We all have our limits of where we're comfortable with, and some people have some people are much more comfortable than others, and some people like to play closer to the vest, which I think is great, because then we get such diverse, wonderful books. I mean, the four of you couldn't be any more different as writers, and yet you all fall under this contemporary umbrella, which is great, and that's what makes it all so wonderful. So before we wrap up, I want to give you all opportunity to plug your books, plug yourselves, plug your social media, share all that type of stuff. So except for Kevin and his social media network, no bueno. But let's start, Rick. Let's start with you. Go ahead and tell folks where they can find you, where they can find your books. Any last minute thoughts?
Okay. My latest book just came out this week. It is called Wounded Air, and it's from 9 Star Press. It's a kind of contemporary urban ghost story about a haunted industrial loft apartment, and it draws in elements of drug addiction and missing persons and murder or not, and unreliable narrators and all that kind of stuff. As far as where people can find me, if you Google my name with the R in the middle, Rick R. Reed, it will bring up my blog, which also is my website, Rick R. Reed Reality. I'm on Twitter as Rick R. Reed. I'm on Facebook as Rick R. Reed. So if you want to find out what I'm doing and what's current with me, those are good places to start.
Excellent. Trina, how about you?
Yep. So get the spelling right, but if you Google me, which is not the easiest thing to do, to find me, you really do have to be looking for me. But I have a blog and website, which is petrinabinney.com. You can find me on Twitter at Words of Bin. I'm on Facebook. I'm pretty well I'm on Pinterest as well. I'm still not quite sure why, but it's scrapbooking, but not. Anyway, you can find all of my stuff at Amazon, and yeah, I mean, I'm basically everywhere. Spell me right, you will find me.
Excellent. Yeah, that seems to be a key for everybody. Spell our names right.
Hans, well done.
Yeah, Hans, what about you?
Yeah, spelling is everything. Unless you want chocolate underwear sent to your house by Amazon, I think it is definitely worth spelling my name right. But you will find me. My website is hirschi.se, se being the country Sweden on the internet. So don't spell com or anything, because that's a Swiss engineering firm, which is not associated with me in any shape or form, unfortunately. I tried to buy the domain, didn't work. So hirschi.se it is. I'm currently on a hiatus from social media because it's just too toxic. But yeah, I have a Facebook profile. I might go back there at some point. I'm on YouTube, but I'm reachable on my website. That's probably the easiest way to reach out to me right now. And I'm my stuff through my publisher, Beaten Track Publishing. It's all up on Amazon and everywhere else you find books these days.
Excellent. Kevin, what about you?
I'm pretty much everywhere. Again, if you can get the spelling of my name right, it's kevinclair.com, and all the information's there. I'm mostly active on Twitter, although I have got I'm also on Facebook and have a Facebook author page, which is not Kevin Clare. It's a drama queens with love scenes, because early on, that's what I picked, and I don't want to change it. Also, Claire at Clare Kevin on Instagram. But look, you can find out all about me, kevinclair.com. There's lots of there's blogs there. There's blogs, guest blogs from other authors. There's all my old media stuff, and how to contact me and how to talk to me. And also, if you go to my Twitter profile, if you click there, there's a link tree that also gives you everything, even my YouTube and everything else.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you guys for being here today. I know that different time zones, so I really appreciate it. I know how stressful that can be, especially when you're halfway around the world and trying to coordinate it. So thank you everybody for being here. To everybody watching this, I suggest that you go to the IcarusBooksCon.com website and check out our bookstore, because I believe you all have books listed there.
Wonderful.
Which is a great way to support these fantastic authors. If you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat, or if you want to jump on over to the Discord site, I think some of you are going to be jumping over there to talk with some folks. We are asking everybody, all of our panelists, if you don't mind putting your website links in the YouTube chat once we're finished, that would be great. Otherwise, thank you all so much, and have a great day, guys, or evening.
Thank you.
Morning.
Good night.
Morning here. I just had a shower before this and stumbled out of bed.
Excellent. Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
so much. An applause.
Good night.
Thank you, Mark.